Where the Stars Do Not Take Sides, by Witch of Endor. Chapter 5, Youth Bleeding in the Square. Funerals were held all over the city, the youth bleeding in the square. Women raged as old men fumbled and cried. We're sorry. We thought you didn't care. Lee! The Avatar hops off the bison before it's even off the ground and throws himself at Zuko. Zuko just about manages to raise his bound hands in time for the Avatar to avoid pinning his arms to his sides with the hug. Azula looks back toward the palace. There's no way the bison will go unnoticed for long. You're okay! The Water Tribe peasant boy yells, relieved. We were so worried! Well, he almost wasn't, Azula snaps. The Avatar and his friends finally notice her and drop from the beast to fall into formation. Azula rolls her eyes. Guys, we don't have time for this, Zuko points out, because he's obviously the only one of them with any sense at all. Azula is coming with us. Azula is... She's coming with us? The waterbender repeats. There's movement in their direction. They're out of time. On the bison, Azula shouts, snapping. On the bison, now! She is not coming with us, the waterbender shouts. That is insane! Why would she be... Zuko looks toward his friends desperately and then back to where the guards are visible in the distance, coming closer and closer. His face hardens slightly. Then neither am I, he says. Thanks for coming, though. Could I maybe get my swords? He looks down at his bound hands thoughtfully. I guess just one sword would do. What is... The Water Tribe peasant boy starts and then shakes his head. Okay, we really don't have time. Everyone on the bison! Fire princess on the bison! Azula scrambles up to the ridiculous creature's ridiculous saddle and then turns back and holds out her arms to help Zuko and his stupid bound hands. She pulls him up and dumps him next to her, and then they're soaring into the air. Azula lies down flat to protect from the inevitable flames being thrown at them and watches the royal caldera city get smaller and smaller. Well, Azula says when they're at a safe height, Father is not going to like that. She sits up and looks toward her brother, who looks back at her with wide eyes. And then Azula laughs. It's not actually funny. It's not funny at all. Azula just committed treason, stabbed a man in the neck, and dragged her long-dead brother out of their childhood home. Fire Lord Ozai doesn't have any living, non-treasonous children. Azula's laughter spins out of her, and for a moment, Zuko lets out a small huff of a laugh, too. It gets carried away on the wind, and they probably sound insane, but... I just committed treason, Azula says, maybe a touch hysterical. Her laughter goes loose in her chest and spins out of control, and then Zuzu isn't laughing anymore. In fact, he looks a little worried. And then that's funny, too, and Azula's laughter maybe hurts a little. Oh. Zuko says, going from confusion to alarm in a heartbeat. Okay, He reaches out towards her, and Azula pulls away, and then another burst of laughter pours out of her, and she leans forward again. Azula's brother's arms fall around her shoulders, and he pulls her down and toward him. It's okay, Zuko says, soft and quiet, meant just for her. She can barely hear him above her own laughter. It's okay. I'm here. You're here! Azula says, and it sounds oddly desperate even though she doesn't mean it to. Her laughter bubbles again, and it doesn't really sound like laughter at all anymore, but there aren't any tears. It's not like Azula would cry. I'm here, Zuko says again, and everything slows down. It's okay. I'm here, Azula. I'm here. When Azula comes back to herself, Zuko is still muttering, I'm here. And the other bison passengers are silent. This is obviously completely unacceptable. Oh, Ash! Azula says, pulling back from where she was leaning into him. His hands get caught behind her where he's still bound. He lifts his arms and she jolts from them offended. You're treating me like a child. I am not a child. Zuko blinks at her, and his face is doing something that Azula has never seen it do. Azula, you just saved my life and betrayed the Fire Lord doing it. I think you get to have some mixed feelings about that. Sparky, no offense meant or anything, the blind child interrupts. But isn't she the reason that your life was in danger in the first place? Right, Zuko's friends. Azula refuses to be humiliated by that episode. She was laughing, not crying, and adrenaline is real. She'll maim any of them who comments on it. Zuko sighs wearily and goes to rub his face, but can't because his hands are still bound and pressed together. He sighs again. Toph can help you with that, the Avatar says, looking back from the front of the saddle. Zuko holds his hands out and the blind child reaches out until she finds the cuffs. Her face screws up in concentration and then the metal peels back and falls to the saddle between them. Zuko shakes out his hands. When did that become a thing? He asks. The blind girl smiles. It's been a long couple of days, she replies. Good to have you back, Sparky. The waterbender glares. Is one of you going to explain why Princess Azula is here? She asks through a tense jaw. I stabbed a man in the neck, Azula informs them because, again, they need to know that her small laughing episode does not leave her open to any kind of criticism. And saves Zuzu's life. Also, we need to look for a past show tile. That about covers it. Zuko stares at her. Oh, wow. You're still really bad at telling stories, he says. What? Azula exclaims, deeply offended. I am not. You are, Zuko replies. You're bad at something. I'm not bad at anything, and I will have your head if you say that again. Azula responds, pointing a finger at her treasonous brother. You're the one who's bad at things. That's why it's so funny. Zuko responds, and while his smile isn't wide by any objective standard, it's still the brightest smile that Azula has seen since they were children. Azula laughs again. The smile slips off Zuko's features. That was an actual laugh. Relax, Azula insists. Her chest still hurts from before. She's going to have to avoid laughing for a while. She really hadn't thought that would be a problem. Go on if you're such a talented storyteller, Zuzu. Zozo? The peasant boy asks, incredulous. Azula looks up. I'm sorry, have you somehow not put this together yet? She asks. At the set of blank stares, she gestures between herself and her brother. Still nothing. Honestly, how was I having a hard time kidnapping you? She mutters. Are you two together? The Avatar asks. Zuko lowers his face to his freed hands. Well, Azula says, holding herself back from laughing again. That would certainly solve the succession problem, wouldn't it? What? Azula, stop it. No, think about it, Azula goes on. What would Grandfather have said? It's not illegal if you're the Fire Lord. They finish together, and then Zuko lifts his face for a brief grimace. Oh, wow, that's gross. Azula frowns. Don't be so rude, I think we're very pretty. Zuko's shoulders shake, and he's definitely either realizing that Azula is the funniest person he knows, or he's about to suffer a terrible adrenaline crash. You're such a narcissist, he accuses, and then sits up. He sobers and looks at his friends. I should apologize for not telling you earlier, but Zuko looks to Azula, and Azula rolls her eyes. Just look at us, she tells them, and moves to sit closer to her brother. She indicates her face, and then his. When there isn't an immediate exclamation of understanding, she raises her left hand to cover her eye and scowls. I shall teach you firebending, Avatar, she says, pitching her voice low and smoky and serious. Zuko scowls. I don't sound like that, and I never said that. One of you seeing people is going to have to fill me in, the blind girl says, lying back against the side of the saddle. Oh, the waterbender says, and then gasps. Oh, wow! How did I not see that before? It's because I didn't do my excellent impression, Azula replies. That or you're all hopeless idiots, but who knows? She's your sister, the peasant boy says, voice quiet and wondering. Which makes you the long-last Fire Prince, Azula finishes with a flourish. Heir to the dragon throne. Zuko stiffens immediately. I'm not the heir. You're the heir. Unless we get married, Azula responds. Then we're both the heir. Zuko's face falls into his palm again. I hate to break this to you, but I think that maybe neither of you is the heir since you just ran away, the blind girl suggests. Also, Sparky, uncle to be royalty and not tell us. I'm not royalty, Zuko insists. I was once, but the Fire Prince is legally dead, remember? Your name isn't Lee, the peasant boy says. Zuko winces. I've gone by Lee for years, he replies. He sounds quieter now, more unsure of himself. Azula misses the laughter. But I wasn't born Lee. We don't even know your name. Wow. The peasant looks distinctly unimpressed, turning away from the pair of them. Azula watches, but she's already bored with the drama. That's just great. It's Zuko, Zuko says. You can just call me Lee, though. Nobody responds immediately, and Zuko looks a little lost. Azula sighs. Once again, she's going to clear up stupid Zuko's stupid mess. You can just land whenever, she says. We're far enough away that we'll be safe. My brother and I can take it from here. Zuko nods softly where Azula had been expecting him to ask his friends to keep them. But if Zuko is that resigned, then it probably says something about the loyalty of these people, and Azula needs to slow down and make plans. She's going to need to make so many plans. Apparently, they're going to usurp their father. The blind girl sits up. Wait, you're leaving? She asks. We're letting them leave? Azula tenses. So does Zuko. He's smart enough to know an underlying threat when he hears one then. I won't be anyone's prisoner, Azula insists, chin high. And I will incinerate all of you for trying. Could you avoid doing that while we're in the sky? The blind child suggests. And relax, Fire Hazard. I wasn't suggesting imprisoning you, just that we should stick together. The waterbender scowls. We were going back to Dad, she says. We can hardly take them there. Zuko flinches again and then seems to calm himself with a breath. You found your father? Yes, while you were busy finding yours, apparently. The waterbender responds, tone sharp. Zuko isn't looking up anymore. Azula tilts her head as she watches him. That's great. For you. It is, the peasant boy responds, voice as gold as his sister's. Guys, the avatar says, sounding nervous. I know this is weird, but Lee, Zuko probably had a good reason for not telling us. Don't you, Zuko? Zuko hesitates before responding, and the waterbender scoffs. Wow, Zuzu, Azula drawls. My friends just committed treason to get us out of the palace alive, and yours are considering throwing you from a flying bison. I think this means I have better taste in friends than you do. Maybe you just don't lie to your friends constantly, the waterbender snaps. Azula raises an eyebrow. No, I do. Must run in the family then. Katara? The avatar says, awkward and desperate. What, Aang? The waterbender asks. She has been hunting us down, chasing us. She hurt us. And it turns out that Lee is... Sorry, Prince Zuko is her brother, and he just let us think that he was a... The blind girl raises a hand. War orphan and or runaway? She suggests. Except it seems like he is at least one of those things, right? Lies by omission are still lies, the waterbender states. Tell that to my feet, the blind child retorts. Azula turns to Zuko for clarification. Feet? She asks, and Zuko shakes his head. She's an earthbender. She does this thing. It's really neat, actually. She can feel movement through the earth. It's like seeing with her feet. And she can feel heartbeats, so she can tell when people are lying. He pauses. Probably not you, though. Flatterer, Azula says automatically, and then sits back to watch the mess that is this group. Okay, I'm all caught up. You can continue judging my brother's worth now. A hush falls across the group, and Azula pretends to pick the petals from an imaginary flower. Throw him from the bison. Don't throw him from the bison. Throw him from the bison. Nobody is throwing anybody off the bison, the peasant boy exclaims. The waterbender appears to have geared up again. Is this why you didn't want to teach Aang firebending? She asks. Because you weren't sure where your loyalties lie? What? No. I didn't want to teach Aang firebending because I'm not a good firebender. Azula blinks. Didn't you invent that thing you do with the swords? She asks, confused. Zuko blinks back at her. Yeah, why? Azula is quiet for a moment and then shakes her head. No reason. Aha! the peasant boy exclaims, pointing at Azula and then Zuko. See, I told you! Sokka, now is not the time, the waterbender snaps. The peasant boy's hand wavers and then he lowers it. Oh, right. So, the blind girl says, leaning back and facing the sky again. What do we do now? They end up landing in a clearing far enough away from any population that they can allow Appa to rest in safety. It also gives them a chance to figure out whether or not they're splitting up. Zuko tries not to feel too much about that. He's been absurdly lucky today, and he's thankful for his life and for Azula right now. It makes sense that he doesn't get to have his friends too. Zuko automatically builds a small fire and starts to help Katara to get some food together, but she tenses and stops when he gets too close, so he gives up and retreats. He spends a few moments with Appa, making sure he's fed and running a brush through his fur, and then comes back to the group. Azula is sitting by the tiny fire. She doesn't look great. Zuko watches as she reaches up and works the crown out of her topknot. She then pulls at her hair until it loosens and settles around her shoulders. She stares at the fire all the while, but Zuko can tell that she is coiled tight and ready to defend herself. Zuko sits close to her, hoping that his presence allows her some calm. He doubts it will, but he's pretty useless otherwise. So, if this goes well for us, Azula says, who ends up as Fire Lord? You, Zuko says automatically. Even if you want to restore my crown, I don't want to be considered for the throne. Azula breathes deeply. Zuko thinks that it sounds like relief. I'll be the youngest Fire Lord in history. Zuko nods, watching the fire with her. Uncle Iroh will be helpful. Oh no, Azula says, and Zuko looks over to see her eyes flutter closed for just a moment. I'm going to owe him so many games of Pai Sho. I think you can get away with saying no, since you'll be busy ruling a nation. Will you play for me? Azula asks. Do you even like Pai Sho? Zuko shrugs. I haven't played since I was in the palace. I'm probably not very good. Yes, well, you're not very good at anything. Azula agrees and flashes him a small smile. But you can keep Uncle company. And babies, I'm not having any. You're in charge of having and raising heirs. I'll play the Pai Sho and raise the babies. Zuko agrees. That doesn't sound so terrible, but... We should talk about how we get there. Azula looks from the fire to the sky. She looks deeply unhappy. We're going to have to murder Father. Aang drops suddenly on Zuko's right. Azula tenses up again. We don't need to kill him. Aang disagrees. We can just dethrone him, right? We can keep him in prison somewhere. I don't want to have to kill anyone. You won't have to kill anyone, Azula says, her voice dropping low with intent. I'll do it. Azula, Zuko says. What, you think I can't? He tried to kill you when you were 11, Zuko. He burnt half your face off and he let me think you were dead, and then I brought you home and he tried to kill you again. I could do it. Zuko thinks about what killing their father would mean to Azula. He thinks about how she's thrown her entire life away for Zuko, and Zuko is sure that he's not worth it. And then he realizes that silence has fallen across the camp. He tried to kill you when you were 11? Aang asks quietly. Zuko decides to keep his eyes on the fire. We don't have to kill him, he says, redirecting the conversation. Not if there's another option. It's not exactly a family legacy we want to continue, is it? Azula is apparently having none of it. I'm sorry, she says to Aang in a way that's clearly not sorry at all. Why do you think he was an Earth Kingdom runaway child? Father and grandfather, Fire Lord Azula, tried to, burn you to death, starting with the face? She turns to Zuko for clarification, but Zuko wasn't exactly informed of the plan. He just shrugs. And then Mother took him and ran, and killed Grandfather in the process? She hit him in the head with... Do you remember that stone dragon sculpture that used to be inside the main entrance of the throne room? Azula stops a half laugh and Zuko flinches. Wow, what a way to go. Death by an incredibly ugly statue. Probably didn't make it into the official records. Zuko responds. What did Mother do in the Earth Kingdom? It's not like she had a wide array of transferable skills. Zuko shrugs. You learn skills on the road. I'm a pretty good steamster nowadays. Not that it's going to help much with father. Azula is quiet again, and Zuko can feel her staring at him, so he turns to her and raises his eyebrows. Zuzu, she continues to stare him out. What did Mother do in the Earth Kingdom? Zuko frowns, unsure what's wrong, and then wonders if Azula is imagining something worse than the truth. She died. Azula sits back for a moment. She died? Straight away? No, it took months. Zuko replies. Didn't we talk about this? Azula purses her lips as she continues to look at him. I guess I imagined that you had a few good years with her beforehand. Her eyebrows draw in just slightly. But she just kidnapped you and abandoned you to the viper wolves? She didn't abandon me, Azula. She died. Zuko says, hearing it come out sharp even as he tries to soften it. Azula looks away. She's still frowning. There's an issue about Katara's food. Azula glares and refuses to eat, and Zuko runs a hand through his hair, still relieved to have both hands free, and sighs. It's not poisoned. He assures his sister, but she still doesn't touch the food. Zuko leans forward and switches their bowls. Better. Why would I think they're less likely to poison you? Aang looks distraught. We wouldn't do that! He insists. They really wouldn't. Zuko insists. They wouldn't poison either of us. Aang doesn't even want to kill the Fire Lord, remember? Azula stares him down. You're too trusting, she says. You always have been. Oh, wow, you weren't kidding with that, right? Toph asks from across the circle. Zuko didn't even tell us who he was. Getting information from him was like learning to metal bend. He won't even tell us why he wouldn't tell us. Sorry, Fire Hazard, but you've read him wrong on this one. Zuko shrugs. You still haven't told us the metal bending story. He points out to Toph, who throws her arms in the air and mutters something that sounds like, yeah, there we go, prove my points. Plus, we just saved you, Sokka adds. Zuko doesn't look at him, doesn't look at either of the Water Tribe siblings anymore because he can't watch them look level and cold. It would be a waste to kill you now. Azula hums and then switches their bowls back. Zuko thinks that might be a trusting gesture from her, but then she says, They knew who I was when they let me on the flying beast. They didn't know who you were, so they're more likely to be poisoning you. Zuko looks through the heavens and asks Agni for patience. After lunch, Azula places her bowl to one side and points at Zuko. Get your swords. Zuko has been quiet and contemplative, and not in a good way. He won't look at almost any of his ex-friends in the face. Plus, Azula is still brimming with angry energy. Sparring? The Avatar asks, airbending himself up to stand. Can I watch? Azula pauses. I wasn't thinking it as sparring so much as shooting fire at the least flammable person here, but sure. Let's call it sparring. They all end up following, which had not been Azula's intention. She thought that some time away from the mistrustful group might be good for the pair of them. However, they're mistrustful, so they're probably here to ensure that she and Zuko don't make a run for it. Zuko seems to think that they want poison or imprison them. Azula is less convinced. They're desperate fighters in a war. They'll do much worse than that if they feel they have to. Azula and Zuko fight hard. Azula fights dirty. It gives Azula a chance to see his firebending up close. She's maybe a tiny bit interested, but only because it takes a stupid amount of control to do what he's doing with the swords. Lose the swords, she says eventually when they slow to a stop facing one another. Zuko looks unsure, but he places them to one side and returns. Azula wins easily this time. You're rusty, she says once she's taken him down. Again. Azula pays more attention this time. Here's the thing. Zuko has a lot of control, but no training. He'd been a late bloomer. They hadn't known he would be a bender at all until he was already almost 8 years old, far behind the usual age. What Zuko had needed was years and years of rigorous training, but he's only received a few beginning years and then abandonment, and considering his face, probably a decent helping of fear. Azula takes him down again. How scared were you of fire? She asks, testing the theory. Zuko looks up at her from the ground. He hesitates, clearly on the edge of asking for clarification, and then looks thoughtful. Pretty scared, he admits, but Mother made me use it again quickly. Smart, back on the ostrich horse. Your control is decent, Azula says. That makes sense of your sword trick. You probably developed the control because you were afraid. She was right to make you use your fire anyway, but you didn't practice the katas, and now you're average at best in a fight without the swords. Azula doesn't tell him that average at best is above average for someone with so little training. He doesn't need the ego boost, and even if he does, Azula isn't the one who'll be handing it to him. Instead, she runs him through a basic kata and Zuko takes direction. She corrects his balance and watches again, and then notices that they have closer company than she'd expected. Your balance is just as bad. Don't rely on airbending to compensate. It won't serve you in the long run. Copy me, Azula says and goes through the kata again. The avatar watches and then recreates. That was acceptable. She introduces fire to the kata. Zuko gets it quickly, probably because it's buried deep in his memories anyway, and the avatar isn't far behind. She increases the difficulty trying to work through Zuko's rustiness and the avatar's endlessly tiring enthusiasm, and before long, they're looking a lot better. Azula puts Zuko through another test run with the swords while the avatar is practicing. She pays close attention to the sword work this time, quickly considering and then dismissing the idea of having him teach it to her. Azula hasn't mastered sword fighting and has little interest in it, largely because it's so close range. Zuzu, she says, interrupting him in the middle of a spinning kick. He lands gracefully and then lets the fire die down as he looks up at her. How far-reaching an attack can you do? At the end of the afternoon, when the group has accomplished nothing but 3 trees ablaze and some refined skills, the avatar turns to Azula and executes a decent bow with the sign of the flame. Azula raises an eyebrow. Azula takes no responsibility for the trees, even the one that only lit on fire because she was certain that Zuko's reach wouldn't extend that far, and was proven wrong in a glorious blaze. Anyway, the waterbender is there to put out unintended fires, and she should be grateful for the opportunity to be useful. Thank you, Sifu Azula, the avatar says. Azula scowls. I'm not teaching you firebending. You just intruded on my sparring with my brother. The avatar just smiles in response. They go back to the campsite for dinner. It's starting to get cooler, so Zuko lights their campfire. Katara glares at him for him, but he doesn't look her directly in the face, so he pretends that it doesn't happen. Somehow they've wasted the afternoon. They're no closer to knowing what happens going forward. Anxiety is pooling in Zuko's stomach. Azula eats more easily this time. Zuko thinks that she must be tired and hopes that he can convince her to sleep, but he thinks that she's unlikely to rest when she's surrounded by strangers who may or may not be enemies. So, Aang says, overly chipper, after an afternoon of firebending practice, the good thing about all of this is that we have a plan for after we defeat Ozai, right? You can all come for tea at the palace, Azula says dryly, and then you can leave me alone. I meant that we can end the war, Aang says. We weren't sure if it would be any better with you instead of Ozai, but now we can team up. Azula looks up, eyes flashing. Zuko feels very acutely that this is about to go all wrong. Why would we end the war? We're winning it. A hush falls across the camp. Because, Katara splutters, because it's wrong. You betrayed your father, surely you know that. Azula's eyes narrow. My treason was personal, not political. Wow, so if we get rid of Ozai, we're just paving the way for Fire Hazard to keep decimating the world. That's just great. Toph comments, leaning back against a pile of bags. Zuko hears Sokka take a breath and deliberately keeps his eyes on his food. Brent Zuko. Zuko raises his chin a little to indicate that he's paying attention. Could you tell your sister about what life was like in the Earth Kingdom? Zuko's eyes do dart up then, but his gaze barely settles on Sokka before looking at his food again. Clarify. Yes, exactly, Katara adds, rushed and impatient. Tell your sister about how bad it is out there. How much damage the Fire Nation is doing. Tell her about how when we found you, you were working yourself to the bone just for a meal. Not even a bed for the night. Zuko ducks his head, humiliation clawing at his chest. How long were you doing that for, huh? Just doing anything you were asked to do for the promise of food. Zuko flinches. Not anything. He snaps, looking up at her. It's a mistake. She's glowering at him, but Zuko holds her gaze for a moment and then looks at Azula. Not anything. He repeats. There are some things I would rather not eat than do. Azula understands. Zuko realizes. Her face relaxes, but it's deliberate. Okay! Toph interrupts. I'm putting a stop to this before Sparky literally has a heart attack. And Toph can feel just how fast his heart is beating. That's great! He draws a deep breath, trying to calm himself down. They're not wrong, though, Azula, Zuko says, because he understands why Sokka and Katara think that it's important that he tries. The Earth Kingdom is crumbling. We were told that the Fire Nation are fighting this war because we want to improve the world, and that the problem is that the other nations won't accept our help to stop being savages. But we're just ruining them. They would have been better off without us, and... Zuko deliberately doesn't look at Aang. And the air nomads certainly would be. We're not making the world better. We would be if they just stopped fighting, Azula says, and Zuko can hear in her voice that she's quoting from what they were taught as children. But they won't stop fighting, Azula, Zuko points out, just like we wouldn't if they tried to take away our way of life. You know, Toph says, sounding thoughtful, this might actually work in our favor. We always thought it was Ozai or Azula, but we have someone here who understands why the war needs to stop, and he's a legitimate contender for the throne. Zuko thinks that his heart might actually stop. Everything goes gray around the edges. I won't, he says, sharp and acerbic as he can, when he can hardly see. I won't. This is why I didn't tell you. I'm not taking the throne. I'm not. Zuko is sure that he keeps talking, but he can't even hear himself. He's glad that he's sitting so that he doesn't fall. But was he sitting? Did he fall? Everything spins and narrows. Zuko won't take the throne. They're going to force him onto it. He was right this whole time. He knew this would happen. He should never have followed them into this war. He should have disappeared. Can he still disappear? Will they find him? There are hands on Zuko's wrists. There are words that aren't his, and for a moment he can't quite parse out what's happening. Dethrone you immediately. It's never happening, idiot. I would just usurp you. You know I would. Zuko tries to draw a deeper breath. His chest hurts too tight to take the air. Promise? Promise, Azula replies. If anyone ever forces you onto that throne, I will usurp you. I won't even kill you to do it. I need you for pie-sharing babies, remember? Zuko rests his breath under control. His chest relaxes. Sorry, Zuko, Aang says, sounding distressed. Toph didn't mean... We wouldn't really do it if you didn't agree to it. Zuko doesn't look at him. He looks at Azula instead, who is serious and drawn. Do we need to leave? She asks quietly, aimed only at him. Zuko shakes his head. He is clearly in no fit state to make any kind of decision right now. We won't, Katara agrees. I don't think that's even a thing we could do, Prince Zuko. But we will keep fighting as long as there is war. We will free the world. I want the world to be freed too, Zuko says. I just won't do that. We'll figure it out, Toph says, uncharacteristically quiet. Sorry, Sparky. They don't figure it out. Eventually, tired and angry, the group retires to sleep. I'll keep watch, Zuko says, in hopes that it will give Azula an excuse to rest. Azula hums. Wake me up for second watch. Obviously that isn't going to work for us, Sokka points out, and once again Zuko avoids looking at him. We'll keep our own watch. Great, Zuko says, hearing his own voice come out stilted and stiff. They don't even trust Zuko enough to keep them safe anymore. It's not completely unexpected, but it still stinks. Sokka takes the first watch with Zuko. They sit next to each other, awkward and stilted, for a long time. Zuko focuses on keeping the fire at a low burn, warming their makeshift campsite. Azula is lying down and breathing evenly, but Zuko doesn't really know if it means she's sleeping. He used to be able to tell when she was faking sleep, back when they were children. but it's been a long time since they've been children. Sokka takes a deep breath. So, Zuko keeps staring at the fire. So, Prince Zuko, Sokka says like he's testing the shape of it in his mouth. Not Lee. Could you... I'm not a prince, even if I was born one. Just Zuko is fine. Or Lee. I'm used to being called Lee. Yeah, but it's not your name. It was a lie. Zuko winces. I didn't mean to lie to you specifically. Then you could have... You know what, never mind, we're going around in circles. Zuko glances up at Sokka for long enough to see that he's rubbing at his own temples. I'm just angry, I guess. Zuko looks forward again and nods. Quiet falls across the camp again, and then Sokka shifts. He redistributes his weight, moving so that one leg is bent and he's facing Zuko. Hey, he says, and Zuko looks up. Sokka's face is still painted in hard lines, in a way that it never has been when looking at Zuko. I'm angry, but I'm not going to be angry forever. You know that, right? Relief unwinds something that had been tight in Zuko's spine. Oh, he says, and then keeps looking at Sokka. Sokka is angry. Sokka won't be angry forever. Zuko leans in and kisses him. For the briefest moment, it's pleasant and simple, and a heavy rush like that feeling from the first kiss in Ba Sing Se. And then abruptly, it's not. Sokka's hand lands on Zuko's chest and pushes him away hard. Zuko catches himself before toppling over. The surprise catches him off guard, and he looks Sokka in the face again, and it's much worse than the harsh lines from before. Sokka looks furious. Why did you do that? He hisses, clearly struggling to remain quiet enough to not wake the camp. Why would you do that? Sokka wipes the back of his hand across his mouth like Zuko was something disgusting. I thought you wanted... Zuko starts, but he doesn't know where to end that sentence, so he lets it trail off. Sokka glares. I just told you that I'm angry, he says, and Zuko is confused because surely that's a reason to give him something that he wants. And then Sokka continues, I just said that! Why would you think I want this now? Oh. It takes Zuko a moment to put this all into place. But it makes sense. Sokka had wanted Lee, but he doesn't want Zuko. It's so obvious now that Zuko feels stupid. He looks away and nods. Sokka stays beside him, coiled tight with tension, and then lets out a steady breath. I'm going to sleep, he says. You can keep watch alone. When you're ready to wake up your psychotic sister, wake me up to take watch again. Zuko stays quiet and very, very still. He doesn't wake anyone for second watch. Azula rises with the sun, which is confusing because she has expressly requested that Zuko wake her to take over guarding the pair of them. Zuko is still sitting where Azula left him, staring off into the distance. Really? Azula asks. You let me sleep all night. You needed it, Zuko responds, eyes softening as he looks at her. You all did. Ugh, this is the problem with Zuzu. He's all heart and no head. Azula takes off to do her morning practice and watches from the corner of her eyes as Zuko gets breakfast together. Good, she can trust that this meal won't be poisoned then. The Avatar and his friends rise slowly and take food from Zuko without question. Azula joins them and eats and then watches as the Avatar and his friends pack up the camp. You need to practice, Mom, Azula says to Zuko. You're never going to improve if you don't take it seriously. Zuko rolls his eyes as he carries a bag over to the beast. How much do I really need to improve to play Pai Sho and raise children? He asks, and coming from him, it's the height of comedy. Oh, forget about that zapping we have to do before Pai Sho and children, Zuzu? Azula asks. You're practicing with me before breakfast, starting tomorrow. Azula looks up to the Avatar, who's looking between Azula and Zuko with rapidly increasing awkwardness. Well, isn't Zuko coming with us and you're... not? It's the most ridiculous thing Azula has ever heard. But then a very awkward quiet falls across the camp and Azula thinks, is it really that ridiculous? Yes, Azula is Zuko's sister. Yes, she saved his life. But the blind child hadn't been wrong yesterday. Zuko's life had only been in danger because Azula's plan had failed. Azula looks toward her brother. He seems suddenly very drawn, mouth tense around the corners, eyes tired and narrowed. This is unbelievable. Fury straightens Azula's spine. Zuko sighs deeply and then turns from Azula to his friends. He executes a perfect bow. Azula supposes his training has remained in some small, useless way. I am grateful for your attempt to rescue me. He starts, polite and firm. Their failed attempts, Azula interjects. You would have bled out long before they arrived. And you know that I am in agreement with you about the importance of ending this war. But I will not abandon my sister. Azula hesitates halfway through crafting another interjection into his stupid little speech. Zuzu is staying with her. She won't admit to feeling relief, but something unfurls in her, and the anger dissipates slowly. What? You'll just turn against all of your principles? The waterbender asks, looking completely incensed. You'll let the war continue, let the rest of the world crumble under the weight of the Fire Nation and just play Pai Show? Zuko stands at his full height. Azula thinks that he looks more like a prince of the Fire Nation now, clad in Earth Kingdom green with his hair loose and shaggy around his ears, than he ever did when they were children. I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying my hardest to convince Fire Lord Azula that the war must end, he says. But I will not turn against her. You don't think you owe us more than that? The waterbender responds. Katara, the peasant voices quietly. Don't. Zuko tenses even further. It looks painful. I am aware that I owe you much, he says, and Azula doesn't understand what's happening on his face or in the tension of his shoulders, but it looks painful and Azula doesn't like it. There have been many meals and items at time. You don't owe them a thing, Azula responds. You tried to sacrifice your life for them. It's not your fault that you didn't quite manage it. That is not what I meant, the waterbender says, and her voice is loud somehow. She sounds as bewildered as she is angry. I meant for the friendship, Lee. And then something much worse happens on Zuko's face. It clears of emotion entirely, and Azula doesn't understand what the waterbender has said to cause that reaction at all. I didn't realize, Zuko says, and his voice is devoid of emotion too, that I had a debt for that. I apologize, but I am unable to repay you at this moment. I will find a way to clear my debt. Stop it! The peasant boy snaps. Everyone just stop it! You don't owe us something, Zuko. That is not how friendship works, and Katara doesn't think you're supposed to repay us. She's just upset because you're leaving. Zuko looks to Azula, and Azula is pretty sure that she understands his expression completely, even as it remains a blank mask. She's pretty sure that he means, get me out of here! As she stares at his very carefully emotionless face, Azula wonders if Zuko has too much control. Azula would certainly be burning something by now, but while her brother's hands hold a tremor, they hold no flame. And suddenly Azula is very aware that her brother has been alone since he was 11, maybe 12 at the most. This isn't the kind of control that is born from training, it's born from necessity. I'm going to need you to do more than play Pai Show and have babies, Azula says, and Zuko blinks at her, surprised by the non-sequitur. Do you remember when we were children and I pushed you off the roof by the hanging gardens? The blind girl scoffs. Wow, Sparky, you're really leaving us for this? Zuko nods. I remember, he says. You overbalanced and fell after me. You broke your wrist, but of course that's what you remember about it. Did you know what Mother said to me afterwards? She told me I didn't have a heart. Zuko flinches. She shouldn't have said that to you. She wasn't wrong, Azula points out. You were always all heart, though. Azula stops for a moment and then sighs. The Fire Nation, Zuzu. I can be its head, but I can't be its heart. What does that mean? Zuko asks. Azula tries for a smile. It means that you've been promoted to advisor, brother, and the first piece of advice that I'm taking from you is about the necessity to end this war.